Yeah, that is something that I
Because
I
institutions will come up
Yes.
at the cost of the rich persons. But you must have some percentage to develop the conditions of the poor. Develop the conditions of the poor
That was the
children.
most important thing which I forgot to mention because I just stuck to my topic of institution building. In our school, we have 20% of the children who are underprivileged who are supported by the fees of people who can pay. And we also do a lot of outreach work, like we run a school in a place called MS Palya, which is 99% Muslim population. And when we have our teacher training sessions, we bring them over. And I have friends who run schools in Goripalya, etc. We do a lot of training sessions for them. We help wherever we can. And of course, RTE is there. RTE just came about last year, but we were already taking 20 to 25% of children from the underprivileged, to the extent that today our fees, the amount of fees that goes by way of concession is 32 lakhs per year. So we have children sponsored to the extent of 32 lakhs per year.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abdul Rahman. And what about other districts? I came from Mysore. And what about other districts? Same what you are asked the questions.
See, like I told you, we were just novices. We were women with absolutely no resources who have shown an example of what that this kind of an institution can be made with zero resources. And if everybody has the same burning within them, they can really establish that. And we are willing to help. We have helped many people come up with, consultation in whatever aspect of the institution building they want.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
we believe that knowledge is the only thing that grows with sharing.
Yeah. And also, in our Karnataka officers, education departments, in small schools is giving very trouble for that this ये नहीं है वो नहीं है स्कूल बंद कर दो स्कूल ऐसे परेशानी करते हैं इसका कुछ हल आप बता सकते हैं?
No, what I would like to say here, take an opportunity to say is that let us not just come up and what is happening, what I see around is a lot of schools mushrooming, calling themselves Islamic international schools. Firstly, though we have nothing un-Islamic about our school, we don't call ourselves an Islamic international school because there's nothing un-Islamic, but there is also nothing, everything Islamic in that school. You may point certain things that, why aren't you doing this, why aren't you doing that? So we do, without even calling it an Islamic school, we can still have all the values of Islam inculcated in it. This so also because we need to remain, we have to remain in the system to change the system. And if we go and flaunt ourselves and no, we are going to do this, we are going to teach Quran, we are going to, you're going to be shut off very soon. That's one thing. They see a few scarf ladies and a few Muslims trying to start an institution, they first try to put you down. So what did we do? When I told you one of the factors of an institution is it exists in relation to its environment. You have to develop those connections, those networks, and make those friends, make those, networks so that tomorrow you will be counted as one of them. And then we will see what happens. And then another thing is, until you're sure about excellence, you're sure about not sacrificing on quality, do not start an institution. Please make sure that you're not going to compromise on quality. Don't spoil the brand name of Islamic international schools. Firstly, they call themselves international without having an international curriculum. They have a state curriculum, and just because that name is very attractive, they call it international. And let us form a body which makes a kind of, they give some quality guidelines
and my interest to learn and combine education
and then let everybody who wants to make an institution become part of that body before they actually, form an institution. For example, you have in foreign countries, you have the Ofsteds, you have, you have a kind of an inspection, a body which actually, actually sees that none of the quality is being tampered with and make sure that whoever is running an institution is not sacrificing quality. If we can first develop a body, if the Rehab Foundation can make a body which gives guidelines for quality in Muslim education institutions, it will be very good, and you will not have any trouble after that, because they will all have all the the regulatory processes done for you.
Okay.
Standard operating procedure.
Excuse me, ma'am, sorry to interrupt you. 13, 15 to 30. So maybe at the time we can ask all the questions. Right now we'll go ahead with the seminar. The next topic that would be Islamic concept of education. Miss Amber Khurram, co-founder Oasis International School. I would request Miss Amber to come and present the paper.
50% award in this topic.
Yeah. Concept issues, the first subject was supposed to introduce. Yeah. Conceptual issues because the first subject
as per the speaker.
Don't spoil the brand name of Islamic international schools. Firstly, they call themselves international without having an international curriculum. They have a state curriculum, and just because that name is very attractive, they call it international. And let us, anybody who wants to make an institution become part of that body before they actually, form an institution.
This is a little
Guidelines for quality
philosophy behind
institutions.
what went into Oasis building.
And you will not have any trouble after that, because they will all have all the.
Excuse me, ma'am, sorry to interrupt you.
It does given
We
to
will
me
please
was
save the.
Brother Wahid and Brother Sharif was to present on the concept.
No, sir. It's only about one institution. This roadmap is for everybody.
No, actually, in this we are not discussing any institution.
Yeah, we're not.
We are not discussing any institution.
Yeah, please ask them to compare to other people and ask them to tell about other institutions.
Yeah, in this subject we are not discussing any institution.
individual institution.
Okay. Okay.
It is a case study, and of course the case study is connected with my work, and I'm part of the institution. Okay. Definitely the concept of Islamic education is the most important in all our lives, and I'm in no real position in any way to enlighten you on the concept itself. There's enough and a lot of literature on it. But what really I take my role here is as an educator, and I share my experiences and the challenges, the positives and the limitations that we as a school have faced in the process of execution, to whatever extent, alhamdulillah, we have put the Islamic concept into practice. In the process of educating in an Islamic spirit, and my interest to learn and combine education from an Islamic tradition with contemporary methods, understanding where they complement and where they contradict, to provide a holistic approach to teaching and learning, I got involved in a small research paper, which I will share with you soon. But by what the definition of Islamic education, which I really allude to, is the one by Naqib al-Atas. The recognition and acknowledgement progressively instilled into man of the proper places of things in the order of creation, such that it leads to the recognition and acknowledgement of the proper place of God in their order of being and existence, gradually creating in man the ability to recognize the Creator through the creation. And that is basically the concept of Islamic education, very mildly put. The goal of Islamic education simply is to create the good man and who understands his role and purpose in society, and eventually create the good society. So this was actually the keynote address. Part of the keynote address, this Naqib al-Atas's definition was part of a keynote address given by him at the first World Conference on Muslim Education, which happened in Makkah, in 1977. And Professor Al-Atas is the former director of International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization in Malaysia now, and a member of the International Advisory Board of the Muslim Education Foundation. Now, soon after this conference, and other such efforts in the 1970s, this was the conference there. In the 1990s, the theory and practice of Islamic education received a boost in the Western context. Islamic education proponents and Islamization scholarships have made strides in building educational and social institutions. What we see now, what Sister Aisha mentioned, is the mushrooming of schools coming up here is not a one-off thing. It is something, of course, definitely for us in this context, what she explained is all that went into it. But it is not something that is just happening here. It's happening all over the world. It is part of a movement. So we are not just one oasis here. There are hundreds of oases that are blooming everywhere, right? So this is the whole gist of the thing. But what is missing? Why does education need the change? Is what we are actually researching. So, and right now this movement involves scholars like Sayyid Nasr Al-Attash's Islamization of Knowledge, Ismail Farooqi's Islamization of Social Sciences. So a lot of scholars have put in their efforts. What we today see, an integration of Islam and good schooling, international schooling, is part of a big movement that we'll probably analyze now. The schools mushrooming today are but part of this huge movement in the paradigmic shift of methodology of education in the Muslim world. This is what the philosophy of most of the schools are, right here and probably in the West and even in the East side. So if Muslims are to grow up as witnesses to the truth in a non-Muslim society, they need to understand that society and to develop an objective and critical approach so that they can appreciate whatever is good in it, avoid its evils, and reach out to the non-Muslims, presenting the truths of Islam in a way they can understand and relate to. This is the philosophy, perhaps maybe it will be twisted a little here and there, but ultimately this is the philosophy of most schools that we see today. And now we understand that goals of Islamic education are very different from the goals of schooling. Schooling is just one part of a huge, huge movement, right? So now, the next slide. Now this movement that we're talking about was in response to the failure of Muslim education in several aspects. According to Dr. Israr Ahmad Khan of IUM, the Muslim world today is a supply of information as available in classical sources. And here what we are doing is we are analyzing where we went wrong. We've been not cursing, but kind of taking a lot of blame on ourselves for a lot of things. Why Muslim education has not fulfilled its role and given the meaning that it's supposed to give to the society. So here we analyze where we went wrong, right? And Muslim world today's supply of information is available in classical sources. The teacher hardly talks, critically of the material he shares with his students. Students are generally discouraged from asking questions and from making their own observations. In case an extraordinary brilliant student dares to understand, usually this is the case in most traditional Muslim systems where they are told not to ask too many questions. Maybe there is some hikmah in it, but basically what it does, it does stunt the thinking to a large extent. And as we said, critical thinking is what was analyzed as missing in the educational world. Now, religion itself definitely commands us to be critical, reasonable, and empirical. In the Quran, it is mentioned many, many times as to why don't you try and understand, why don't you reflect, why don't you think, right? But traditionally, our systems do not allow too much of criticism. These are areas that have truly been the strengths of education in the Islamic tradition too. The golden era of Islam was built as a result of some excellent teaching, learning, and educational philosophical geniuses. So it is not in our tradition to not ask, to not be critical, to not think. But somewhere down the line, these things have crept in for perhaps very good reasons. That we have because of the events that happened around the world, because of colonization, because of industrialization, because of the ideologies like Darwinism, Druidism, everything to make everybody God free, right? Because of that, somewhere we have become, kind of compartmentalized our education into two systems. One is religious and one is the regular. And somewhere, probably that is why we are in the state we are today. So, and the question is that could a lack of an ability to think critically question one's understanding, people and conflict around as individuals and as a community, kill the creativity that we are criticizing today in ourselves? Is it because we have somewhere given up this critical thinking ability, right? Now, internationalization, like we again, Starsha mentioned, that we took up the IGCSE syllabus. And if you look at the internationalization concept, according to Mary Hayden, she's my teacher, it lies in incorporating a critical examination of oneself and one's traditions. And if you look at it, just concentrate on the definition. Internationalization, what does it really mean? And whether is it conflicting with the Islamic purpose that we are talking about? Okay, it means the ability to see oneself as bound to all human beings by ties of recognition and concern on the part of the same family. There are an n number of hadith which say that we are all one family, right? The ability to consider what it might be like to be in the shoes of a different person, to develop the knowledge, skills and values needed for securing a just and suitable world in which all may fulfill their potential, and to challenge injustice and inequality wherever these vices raise their heads. So the whole philosophy in internationalizing is very, very aligned to Islamic thinking. And this international system today is based on a critical pedagogy, which again is very, very much aligned to the Islamic principle of Khilafat, about justice and about liberating, about emancipating people, about allowing people to think freely. So definitely it was something that, of course, we took it quite by default, because we did not get, we thought it is better to take an international recognition than wait for ICSE and CBSE. We took it, but definitely what we had in mind is the critical thinking that it would give to our Islamic ethos. So here we come. We adopted the international program, and now the paper. This paper that I'm going to quickly go through explores the effects and patterns of faith schooling, going back to its roots to understand its authentic goals and then applying it to the present context. Findings of the case are quite, what I got in the end was not exact, was quite serendipitous in the sense that it gave me, like how Columbus discovered America. He didn't go out to discover it, but he got it. Similarly, when I did the study initially, it was for a different reason, but what I got out of it, inshallah, we will see. And we'll see if that can be, somewhere helpful to our roadmap. Okay? Now, the study that I did which really impressed me, was a study taken up by Dr. Ali Zohari. My study came out, a need to evaluate what we are doing. And there was another psychologist who was in our school, and she was very intrigued by the system that we are following, and she pushed me into actually evaluating the system, right? So both of us, we got into studying transformational leadership. Okay, now this study which I'm referring to, it examines the values that the Prophet addressed in his sayings and his actions through textual analysis to find the resonant values and how they encourage others to behave and how they impacted the Prophet's leadership style. Basically, it was a study done on several hadiths. Several means like a lot of communication of the Prophet, and they found, this study, doctor found, that his values that came out of the Prophet's communication were those of extraordinary leadership. Okay, we as Muslims, we just take it for granted. But this was an objective study done, and they found that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had not only the values of leadership, but he had the extraordinary values, which political scientists call transformational leadership. right? So when I went through the study, I said, if we are using the seerah of the Prophet in our school, are we going to see transformational leaders in our school? If we teach the life of the Prophet in our school, in our madrasas, in our weekend schools, in everywhere, why are we not seeing transformational leaders? Why is our community lacking in something which was the legacy of the Prophet, right? So that was the question which led me into getting into this study. Okay, yeah, next. Keep clicking. These were the values. Just quickly click. Okay. So if you see the values that you see, the primary values which you will see in most leaders is liberty, justice, equality, and collective well-being. But the extraordinary values that came out of the hadith were being forgiving, gentle, kind, polite, truthful, mercy, and leading by example. These are qualities which you will not very often associate with leadership, with people who want control or who are autocratic. These are qualities that are kind of feminine, if you can call them. They were very, very, soft. And these are not we call them extraordinary, but the next slide. But political scientists have actually come up with these values as being extraordinary. So it's not something that we have given the name to. And what is transformational leadership, right? The term, the kind of leadership that we use is this. It is the influence that occurs when one or more persons engage with others in such a way that leaders and followers raise one another to higher levels of motivation and morality. Leaders evolve from a structure of motivation, values, and goals.